The Qing imperial harem gleams with silk and splendor. In reality, every minute is a survival match between concubines, eunuchs, and princes. But that shine is just a coat of paint over a brewing storm. Beneath it lie perfumes laced with poison and whispers that erase names from history. Draw the curtains aside, and those secrets will gently echo in your dreams. Have you ever wondered what happens when thousands of women are gathered in one lavish palace, all competing for the attention of a single man? Sounds wild, right? Welcome to the Qing dynasty's forbidden city harem. At its peak, this hidden world housed over 3,000 women, all silently battling for survival. And by survival, I'm not just talking figurative backstabbing, though believe me, there was plenty of that, but literal stay alive at all costs stuff. Imagine this. You're living behind grand walls of gold-laced palaces, gardens blooming with flowers you've never even heard of, and luxuries that would make even today's richest celebrities blush. Sounds dreamy, huh? But here's where things get interesting. Luxury was just the glittery surface, hiding an incredibly harsh reality beneath. Life here wasn't just silk robes, endless tea, and leisurely strolls through ornate gardens. Nope. It was more like the world's most dangerous reality show. But instead of getting voted off an island, women risked getting poisoned or quietly vanishing overnight. No dramatic send-off, no tearful goodbyes, just here one day, gone the next. All without leaving a single trace. Now let's meet these women. Most entered the Forbidden City very young, often as teenagers, or even younger, handpicked from across the empire. Beauty was obviously a ticket in, but so were connections, politics, and plain old luck. Once inside, they became the emperor's personal property, existing solely to serve him. Not exactly the feminist dream, I know. Here's the kicker. Most of these ladies never even saw the emperor up close. Yep, thousands of women spent their entire lives waiting in beautifully decorated apartments, hoping for just one glance, one night, or one moment of favor from their royal husband. Talk about ghosting before ghosting was cool. But if a girl did manage to catch the emperor's eye, the stakes skyrocketed. With favor came power and jealousy and danger. The more the emperor liked you, the more everyone else despised you. Suddenly, your meals needed testing. Your servants couldn't be trusted. And even your closest friends might secretly plot your downfall. Popularity had a pretty nasty price tag in this harem. Then there were the women who didn't manage to get noticed. They lived entire lives in quiet isolation, becoming older, forgotten shadows. Ironically, their invisibility might have been their greatest protection. Staying unnoticed was sometimes safer than standing out. Imagine living in a lavish cage, overlooked, but surviving longer than those desperately vying for the spotlight. You'd think in a palace brimming with luxury boredom would be the biggest enemy, but nope, it was fear. Fear of rivals, fear of eunuchs, fear of betrayal, even fear of losing beauty, because aging in a place where youth was everything was terrifying. A wrinkle wasn't just a wrinkle here. It was practically a death sentence. As crazy as it sounds, the harem functioned like a miniature city, one filled with strict rules, constant surveillance, and layers of intrigue so thick you could practically taste it. And hidden deep beneath the glamorous surface was an unspoken brutal truth. Survival wasn't guaranteed for anyone. No exceptions. As we dive deeper into this shadowy world, remember this isn't just a historical soap opera. These were real people living very real, albeit very strange lives. Keep your eyes open, folks. It's going to get juicy, complicated, and occasionally creepy. Ready for more? Now let's talk about eunuchs. Probably not something you planned on hearing about today, right? But here we are. You see, these guys played a unique and surprisingly powerful role inside the Forbidden City. They had special access to the emperor's most private moments. Yet they lived without the one thing everyone else in the palace obsessed over: freedom. So who exactly were these eunuchs, and how did they become such influential figures in a palace filled with secrets? Well, in ancient China, becoming a eunuch was rarely voluntary. Most were either poor boys sold by desperate families, prisoners of war, or criminals who accepted castration to avoid harsher punishments. Not exactly a winning career move, but for some, it was a chance at a better, or at least more luxurious life. Once castrated, they were allowed entry into the Forbidden City, becoming personal servants, confidants, or caretakers to the emperor and his many consorts. Here's where things get a little twisted. Their very status as eunuchs made them trustworthy in the eyes of the emperor, since they couldn't father heirs or threaten the imperial bloodline. This gave them incredible access and influence, but at a steep personal cost, one that most of us would probably rather skip. Eunuchs might have lacked traditional freedoms, but they quickly learned to play a different game, a game of whispers and influence. Because of their unique proximity to the emperor, they heard secrets past messages, and sometimes decided whose whispers reached the emperor's ears. Basically, they were the palace gatekeepers controlling who got noticed and who was quietly erased from history. Here's an interesting tidbit. Eunuchs controlled everything from daily rituals to finances and palace records. They decided schedules, managed visitors, and even administered punishments. If a concubine wanted the emperor's attention, she had to get through his eunuchs first. Imagine needing permission from someone who could make or break your entire future. Talk about awkward power dynamics. However, not all eunuchs were loyal or obedient servants. In fact, palace history is filled with stories of eunuchs becoming master manipulators, forming alliances, plotting revenge, and even leading rebellions. At certain points, the emperor himself found his own eunuchs more dangerous than enemy armies. They knew all his secrets, from embarrassing habits to private affairs, and could leverage this information in devastating ways. One notorious example was the powerful eunuch Wei Zhongxian during the Ming-Qing transitional period. Wei essentially ruled the empire from behind the throne, controlling the emperor through flattery, manipulation, and yes, even intimidation. He amassed wealth, eliminated rivals, and was feared throughout the court. Eventually, his power became too dangerous, even for the emperor, leading to his downfall. But his story shows just how dangerous and powerful a eunuch could become. But here's the thing. Despite their power, eunuchs lived in constant vulnerability. Their status depended entirely on imperial favor, which could vanish overnight. If they fell from grace, they risked banishment, execution, or worse, silently disappearing without a trace. Not exactly job security, right? Today, eunuchs are long gone, relegated to fascinating, somewhat uncomfortable history lessons. Yet their influence shaped entire dynasties. They remind us that power comes in many forms, and sometimes the least expected people wield the most control. Eunuchs trapped in a life of both privilege and sacrifice navigated palace intrigues with silent cunning. So next time you hear someone talk about how tough their boss is, remind them at least they're not working for a moody emperor surrounded by eunuchs with a grudge. Feeling intrigued? Yet trust me, it's only going to get stranger from here. Speaking of strange, let's talk about the women who actually made it to center stage, the imperial consorts. Sure, becoming a consort sounds glamorous, like winning an ancient Chinese version of The Bachelor. You imagine beautiful gowns, endless luxury, and being showered with gifts. And yes, all that was there. And it's a pretty big, but there was a catch. A really bitter, dangerous, sometimes deadly catch. Think of consorts as the celebrities of their time, but with way higher stakes. Every year, thousands of young girls from all over China were carefully screened and selected for their beauty, charm, intelligence, and even their voice. It was like ancient China's version of American Idol, except the prize was a lifetime trapped inside palace walls. And Simon Cowell was the emperor. Once selected, these girls entered a fiercely competitive world where beauty alone wasn't enough. Personality, with family connections, and a healthy dose of ruthless ambition were essential. Because being chosen as the emperor's favorite could change your life forever or shorten it drastically. Let's say you managed to catch the emperor's eye. Congrats, you're in. Now suddenly, you're the palace star, adored, envied, and absolutely despised. The emperor's affection was the ultimate currency inside the Forbidden City, and every moment spent with him raised a consort's status, along with the number of people plotting against her. Remember high school drama. Multiply that by about 1,000, and you get the idea. Every single favor bestowed by the emperor, from jewelry to better apartments, even special delicacies, was publicly recorded and displayed. Think Instagram likes, but with serious political consequences. This transparency was intentional, creating competition, jealousy, and paranoia among the women. Because if someone else's status rose, it meant yours might fall. And no one wanted that. Now let's say you become pregnant. Great news, right? Not exactly. A pregnancy immediately put a target on your back, as rivals saw you and your unborn child as threats to their own power. Secret plots, poison disguised in tea, dangerous accidents, or even mysterious illnesses could appear out of nowhere. Palace medical records show an alarming number of miscarriages, suspicious illnesses, and early deaths among consorts, all attributed vaguely to unknown causes. Coincidence? I'll let you decide. But here's the flip side: failure to produce a son could be equally devastating. Women unable to bear children were often isolated, losing whatever limited status they had. And if the emperor lost interest, well, you'd better get comfortable with invisibility, because you might never see him again. Interestingly, consorts developed strategies for survival. Some relied on their family connections outside the palace walls. Others formed careful alliances within, trading secrets and favors. A few even befriended powerful eunuchs who could whisper the right words into imperial ears. If Game of Thrones had a reality show spin-off, this would be it. One of the most famous examples of this dangerous game was Empress Dowager Cixi. She began as a low-ranking concubine, but skillfully navigated the harem's treacherous waters. Using intelligence alliances and cunning, she eventually controlled the empire from behind the throne for nearly half a century. Love her or hate her, you've got to admire her survival skills. So yes, consorts had beautiful gowns, precious jewels, and plenty of privileges. But their existence was precarious, balancing luxury with constant danger. Beauty was both their ticket and their curse, an invitation to privilege and peril in equal measure. Before you envy their golden lives, ask yourself, could you survive in a world where every smile hides danger? Every gift carries hidden poison, and favor from the emperor might be your greatest threat. And just when you thought things couldn't get more intense, well, buckle up. There's plenty more where this came from. Speaking of women who mastered this dangerous game, let's zoom in on the ultimate palace player, the Empress Dowager. Now, don't let the fancy title fool you. This wasn't some sweet grandma knitting quietly behind silk curtains. No, the Empress Dowager was often the puppet master, pulling the strings of the entire empire. Think of her as the original influencer, just with fewer selfies and a lot more scheming. In the Qing dynasty, harem, few women rose higher or held power longer than an Empress Dowager. Technically, this title belonged to the mother of the reigning emperor, but in practice, it meant something else, entirely absolute power, hidden beneath layers of silk and ceremony. From behind curtains, Empress Dowagers shaped dynasties, removed rivals, and sometimes even chose who would sit on the throne. Pretty impressive for someone society expected to quietly disappear into palace shadows. One of the most famous and most controversial Empress Dowagers was Cixi. Remember her? She started as a low-ranking concubine who slowly and cunningly rose to become one of China's most powerful rulers. How exactly did she pull that off? Glad you asked. You see, when Cixi entered the palace, she was just another pretty face in a crowd of hundreds, if not thousands. But instead of relying solely on beauty, she played a smarter game. She learned the emperor's weaknesses, befriended influential eunuchs, and strategically positioned herself close to powerful figures in the court. And then here comes the twist. She gave birth to the emperor's only surviving son, instantly propelling her from anonymous concubine to crucial player in palace politics. Suddenly, she wasn't just protected. She was dangerous. When the emperor died unexpectedly at a young age, and yes, suspicions flew, her son became the next emperor. But here's the catch. He was just a kid, meaning someone had to rule for him. Enter Cixi, now Empress Dowager and acting regent. She quickly showed everyone she wasn't just holding the throne warm for her son, she had plans of her own. Behind her silk screens and palace walls, she orchestrated events, reshaped government policy, and quietly eliminated threats to her authority. Her methods ranged from subtle persuasion to outright manipulation, using alliances and threats to consolidate power. She was brilliant, ruthless, and let's be real, pretty scary. If you were smart, you stayed on her good side. But here's the real kicker. When her son grew older and tried to assert his independence, Cixi wasn't exactly thrilled. In fact, he mysteriously died at 19, conveniently leaving Cixi to rule as regent once again, this time for her nephew. Coincidence maybe. But palace life taught people to question everything and trust no one. Cixi wasn't alone in her tactics. Empress dowagers throughout Qing history perfected the art of shadow, ruling expertly pulling strings to keep their positions secure. They understood something powerful, true authority, didn't always require a crown. Sometimes the soft rustle of silk curtains and whispered instructions were all you needed to control an empire. Yet despite their power, Empress dowagers lived precarious lives. One wrong move could unleash rivals eager to seize control. The palace was filled with enemies, consorts, hungry for their position, eunuchs, ambitious for influence, and officials annoyed at being bossed around by a woman. Survival meant constant vigilance, clever diplomacy, and occasionally ruthless decisions. Today we marvel at their strength, ingenuity, and sheer audacity. They operated behind closed doors, quietly writing history without leaving fingerprints. Sure, they were surrounded by luxury, but beneath that silk-lined surface, their lives were anything but comfortable. Their true legacy, a testament to the resilience, cunning, and yes, sometimes brutality required to survive and thrive in one of history's most dangerous power structures. And speaking of dangers, if you think this was intense, wait until you hear about the palace's secret assassins and deadly perfumes. Curious yet? Stick around. You won't believe what happens next. Speaking of dangers lurking behind palace silk and gold, let's step into one of the harem's darkest corners, where perfumes weren't just for smelling nice, and meals weren't always meant to nourish. Welcome to the silent world of assassinations, where a dab of perfume could hide poison, and a casual cup of tea might mean never waking up again. Forget spy movies. This was the real deal palace style. If you're imagining masked assassins leaping through windows, you're thinking way too loud. In the Forbidden City, assassination was subtle, quiet, and frighteningly clever. Palace intrigues rarely needed swords and dramatic chases. Instead, they relied on whispered conversations, concealed vials, and deadly beauty products. Yes, beauty products. Perfumes and cosmetics were central to palace life, and ladies often competed fiercely over their scents and looks. But here's where it gets chilling. Some of these lovely fragrances and powders contained ingredients far deadlier than jasmine or lavender. A small drop of poison blended carefully into perfume was nearly undetectable. Just a quick touch behind the ears or along the wrists could cause dizziness, nausea, or worse. And if someone happened to faint and never wake up well, who could suspect a harmless beauty product? One particularly infamous poison used in the Qing harem was arsenic. It was odorless, tasteless, and easy to mix into everything from tea to face powder. Just the smallest sprinkle could be fatal over time. And the scariest part? Slow poisoning often looked like illness, fooling even palace doctors. It was as if beauty itself had become a deadly weapon. Food, too, was a popular method for quiet elimination. Because palace meals were lavish affairs, poisoning a single dish among dozens was nearly impossible to detect. Eunuchs carefully tasted food first, but even that wasn't foolproof, especially if the taster himself was compromised. Imagine living every day, wondering if your next meal might be your last. Not exactly the carefree palace lifestyle you'd hoped for, right? Of course, poison wasn't the only danger. Sometimes assassinations were more hands-on, but still shockingly discreet. Accidental falls, sudden illnesses, or mysterious drownings in palace gardens were all tragically common. If an ambitious consort became too powerful rivals, might quietly arrange for her to suffer a fatal accident during a nighttime stroll. Guards saw nothing. Eunuchs asked no questions. And the emperor, well, he moved on to the next favorite. Even the palace doctors weren't always trustworthy. Some secretly worked for powerful factions inside the harem, using their knowledge to diagnose illnesses that conveniently aligned with political interests. Prescribed treatments could be cures or carefully disguised poisons, depending on who was paying the bill. In the Forbidden City, it paid to know exactly who handled your medicine. Perhaps the most chilling assassinations were the ones no one ever spoke of, when a concubine or servant simply vanished overnight. No record, no investigation, just an empty bed and carefully rehearsed ignorance. Everyone knew better than to ask questions, because curiosity wasn't just dangerous, it could be fatal. Ironically, assassinations often happened during seemingly peaceful moments. A tea party among consorts, a friendly gathering to share cosmetics, or even quiet prayers at a shrine, any ordinary event could turn deadly. Behind smiles and polite chatter lay unspoken tensions, simmering rivalries, and terrifying possibilities. Palace life, despite its outward beauty, was ultimately a chessboard of quiet warfare. Every glance carried suspicion. Every gift required caution. The very tools meant to enhance beauty and joy could easily turn into silent killers. So next time you spray perfume, sip tea, or apply makeup, spare a thought for those women of the Qing Dynasty harem. They lived in constant fear, navigating a world where beauty, jealousy, and power mixed into a dangerous cocktail. And if you thought this was dark, just wait. Up next, we're diving into a chilling mystery that haunts the palace even today. What happened to all those missing princes? Ready for more secrets? Trust me, we're just getting started. If you think disappearing consorts were chilling, wait until we unravel the mystery of missing princes. Yep, princes, as in heirs to the throne, who vanished without a trace. If you've ever felt overlooked by your family, just imagine being royalty, poised to inherit an empire, and then suddenly, poof, gone erased, like a typo in a history book. Throughout the Qing dynasty palace, life wasn't just dangerous. For the women, royal sons faced their own terrifying threats. Princes, especially those seen as potential emperors, were walking targets. You might assume being a prince guaranteed safety, luxury, and privilege. But here's the plot twist being born. Royal could actually shorten your lifespan dramatically. Why? Because power in the Forbidden City was a zero-sum game. Someone else's gain always meant your loss. Princes were threats, not only to rival siblings, but to influential consorts, ambitious eunuchs, and even, shockingly, their own parents. If a prince seemed too strong, too clever, or simply too popular, he might mysteriously vanish overnight. And nobody, not even the emperor himself, seemed eager to investigate. One infamous incident involved Prince Yinreng, the first heir of Emperor Kangxi. He was groomed from birth as the ideal heir, educated, charming, well-liked. Everyone expected him to ascend smoothly to the throne. Then suddenly, things changed. Rumors spread that Yinreng was plotting a rebellion, possibly encouraged by palace rivals or eunuchs hungry for influence. Emperor Kangxi, once proud of his son, grew suspicious and paranoid, and Yinreng was swiftly removed from his position, placed under strict house arrest, and kept isolated. His downfall was swift and absolute, driven by intrigue rather than evidence. He lived out his days in disgrace, quietly forgotten. But other princes weren't so lucky. Some princes vanished entirely from palace records, their names scratched from official documents, portraits burned or hidden. Why? Because erasure was easier and quieter than public execution. If a prince was too powerful or too threatening, it was simpler to pretend he never existed. No trial, no fuss, just silence. Spooky, right? And it wasn't always rivals or outsiders who orchestrated these vanishings. Sometimes the emperor himself feared a powerful son might usurp him or overshadow his rule. Historical whispers suggest certain emperors even orchestrated their own children's disappearances, unable to trust those closest to them. Imagine having a dad who could literally erase your existence. Family dinners must have been a little tense. Even stranger, sometimes missing princes reappeared decades later. Men claiming to be lost princes occasionally surfaced in distant provinces or neighboring kingdoms. Were they genuine royal blood survivors of palace intrigues who escaped assassination attempts? Or were they clever imposters, exploiting palace secrets for personal gain? Usually, nobody could tell for sure, adding yet another layer of intrigue to an already shadowy story. Palace paranoia didn't spare young princes either. Babies and toddlers who seemed destined for greatness sometimes mysteriously passed away due to sudden illnesses or accidents. Palace records were vague, suspiciously lacking in detail, and left historians speculating about darker truths. If these tragedies were indeed planned, they speak volumes about the ruthless desperation that gripped imperial courts. So why didn't anyone speak up or stop these vanishings? Simple fear. Anyone brave or foolish enough to ask questions might become the next to disappear. Palace staff quickly learned silence was safer than truth, leaving generations of secrets buried beneath marble floors and golden thrones. Even today, historians puzzle over these vanished princes, haunted by questions that may never have answers. Each missing prince represents a story, lost a life, erased by paranoia, power struggles, and palace treachery. They remind us that beneath all the glamour, the Qing dynasty harem hid terrifying truths. Truths written not in ink but silence, ready to uncover more hidden palace dangers. Because up next, we're diving deep into the tangled web of palace spies and whisper networks. Stay close, folks. It's about to get sneakier. Speaking of whispers, let's dive into one of the harem's most intriguing secret spies. Forget James Bond, gadgets, or secret agents in sharp suits. Qing dynasty palace spies were masters of subtlety. They dealt in whispers, gossip, and tiny pieces of information exchanged casually at garden parties and bathhouses. Here, knowledge was power, and the right whisper at the right time could mean life or death. In a place overflowing with intrigue, it makes sense that spying became a full-time occupation. Everyone from eunuchs to maids, even gardeners and cooks, could secretly work as informants, passing along vital intel in exchange for favors, money, or protection. If you think your workplace has office politics, imagine working where the stakes involved your actual survival. So how did this elaborate spy network function? Imagine it like an ancient version of social media. Each palace servant maid or eunuch was a potential listening post, quietly noting who visited whom, who wore expensive gifts, or who was suddenly out of favor. bits of gossip traveled rapidly, carefully filtered up through higher-ranking servants, who would then pass the juiciest information straight to powerful figures within the palace. This whisper network wasn't just casual, it was deadly efficient. Eunuchs often ran these espionage rings, controlling what information reached the emperor and deciding whose reputation got quietly destroyed. Want to ruin a rival consort? Just spread a rumor that she was secretly meeting someone suspicious in the gardens after dark. Even the faintest hint of scandal could lead to swift exile or worse. One fascinating method of palace spying involved daily life rituals. Eunuchs and maids paid close attention to personal habits, like how long someone slept, how much perfume she used, or whether she changed hairstyles frequently. Such trivial details could reveal changes in status, health issues, pregnancies, or secret meetings. In other words, even the smallest personal details mattered, and everyone was always watching. Even baths and dressing rooms weren't safe. Palace maids, assigned to assist consorts with personal grooming, heard private conversations and intimate secrets. Consorts knew better than to trust anyone completely. Yet loneliness and isolation often led to dangerous confessions whispered into seemingly trustworthy ears. These maids, in turn, carefully stored these secrets, trading them later for protection or advancement. Talk about multitasking, but who exactly organized these spy rings? Usually powerful eunuchs or influential consorts secretly ran elaborate espionage networks. Some empress dowagers, like the cunning Cixi, maintained extensive networks of informants across every corner of the Forbidden City. These informants passed information directly to her, giving her an almost supernatural ability to predict and preempt her rivals' moves. Ironically, everyone involved in spying was also being spied upon. Eunuchs monitored each other, maids observed other maids, and even consorts paid informants to spy on their own servants. It was a never-ending loop of suspicion where even the spies couldn't fully trust their sources. Paranoia wasn't just common, it was necessary. Interestingly, spies didn't always work against rivals. Sometimes they actually protected each other. If two consorts formed an alliance, their spy networks would combine, creating powerful factions that dominated palace politics. Such alliances could stabilize power temporarily, though they rarely lasted long. Eventually, someone would betray someone else, and the entire delicate network would collapse into chaos. Even today, historians struggle to piece together exactly how these intricate spy networks operated. So much was conducted secretly, with little written down. But one thing is clear: palace spying was a dangerous yet crucial game shaping lives, destroying reputations, and determining who rose or fell. Imagine living each day knowing that every conversation could be overheard, every gesture analyzed, and every secret weaponized against you. Palace life wasn't just dangerous, it was exhausting. The whisper networks were the ultimate silent warfare, a constant threat hanging over every action. And if you think palace espionage was the peak of the harem's darkness, hold tight, because next we're exploring scandals so outrageous they were buried deeper than treasure. Intrigued? Yet don't go anywhere. The drama is just heating up. Speaking of buried secrets, let's turn the page to the scandals the Qing Dynasty harem tried desperately to hide. If you think today's celebrity gossip is shocking, just wait until you hear about these palace cover-ups. Beneath the polished marble and delicate silk lay events so scandalous, so embarrassing, that emperors and empresses themselves went to incredible lengths to erase them completely. But lucky for you, history has a funny way of keeping secrets. Take, for instance, the scandal of Emperor Qianlong and his favorite consort, Xiangfei. Now, Xiangfei wasn't your ordinary concubine, known as the fragrant concubine. Legend says she naturally emitted a scent like fresh flowers, pretty convenient for a palace obsessed with perfumes, right? Yet behind this fragrant facade was tension. She hailed from faraway Xinjiang, and though the emperor was captivated, she was famously resistant to palace life. Rumors swirled that Xiangfei secretly plotted to escape or worse, assassinate Qianlong. So what really happened? Palace records remain vague. But we know this Xiangfei mysteriously died at the peak of her fame, officially declared a victim of illness. Many whispered poison or assassination, but the official story never changed. Then there were the palace fires. Fires were suspiciously common in the Forbidden City, conveniently occurring whenever sensitive documents or troublesome people needed to vanish quietly. Think of it like the imperial version of deleting browser history, just way more dramatic. Eunuchs claimed careless candles, but everyone knew better. Each fire erased secrets, conveniently resetting palace politics and giving rulers plausible deniability. One particularly juicy scandal involved an emperor's illegitimate child. Palace records rarely acknowledged such embarrassing truths, but rumors persisted. Eunuchs, always masters of information control, quietly arranged solutions, sending pregnant maids or disgraced consorts away far from prying eyes. Some historians even suggest secret tunnels under the palace were used to smuggle out those who embarrassed the imperial reputation. Hidden corridors, secret babies, and midnight escapes. Sounds more like a soap opera than reality, doesn't it? But perhaps the most shocking cover-up involved Emperor Guangxu. Modern investigations suggest Guangxu didn't simply die of natural causes. He was likely poisoned, possibly under orders from none other than Empress Dowager Cixi herself. Guangxu had attempted progressive reforms, angering powerful conservative factions. His sudden illness conveniently halted these reforms, returning power neatly into Cixi's capable hands. Officially, Guangxu's death was labeled natural, but whispers and speculation lingered for generations. Scandals involving forbidden relationships also rocked the harem. Palace maids occasionally fell in love with eunuchs, or even guards, relationships strictly forbidden and harshly punished. Eunuchs, though castrated, weren't immune from emotional attachments. Yet palace authorities ruthlessly suppressed these relationships, banishing lovers, or worse, eliminating them outright. Heartbreaking, absolutely. But to palace rulers, appearances mattered more than human lives. Even theft wasn't unusual. Eunuch servants and consorts occasionally stole precious jewelry, royal treasures, or secret documents, quietly selling them outside palace walls. Officially, such crimes were hushed. No emperor wanted to admit weakness or scandal publicly. Instead, perpetrators disappeared. Without explanation, their crimes whispered about, but never confirmed. So how do we know about these scandals today? Well, despite careful efforts to erase history, whispers survive, passed through generations, hinted at in poems, diaries, or letters smuggled out of the palace. Palace life may have silenced voices, but human nature's love of gossip ensured that secrets never truly vanished. Historians today piece together these whispers, building a shadowy puzzle of intrigue and cover-ups that continues to fascinate and horrify. The truth is, scandals weren't anomalies. They were inevitable products of a harem built on secrecy, jealousy, and ruthless ambition. Beneath the beautiful surface lay a tangled web of scandalous truths, desperately hidden but impossible to fully erase. Think we've reached the harem's darkest depths? Think again, because up next, we're stepping beyond intrigue into the supernatural. Ready to hear some palace ghost stories? Trust me, this next part will haunt you in the best way possible. Speaking of being haunted, it's time we turn down the lights, grab a cozy blanket, and talk about ghosts. Because no palace packed with intrigue, murder, and scandal is complete without a few spooky tales, right? The Forbidden City wasn't just famous for luxury and ruthless politics. It was also known for eerie sightings, strange noises, and supernatural encounters that kept everyone awake at night. Turns out, even emperors got goosebumps. Now let's get this out of the way first. Were these ghost stories real? Who knows? But here's the thing. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the palace certainly had enough dark history to inspire them. Unexplained deaths, secret assassinations, sudden disappearances. If anywhere deserved a haunting, it was here. Servants often spoke quietly of spirits, wandering palace corridors, glimpsed briefly before vanishing into thin air. Eunuchs reported hearing mysterious whispers late at night, though when they investigated, no one was ever there. And consorts living in near isolation sometimes insisted they'd been visited by the spirits of former rivals come back to torment them. Scary, absolutely. But in a place filled with paranoia, fear, and secrets, perhaps ghosts provided a convenient explanation for very human crimes. One popular legend involved a haunted well. Palace maids whispered that the well was cursed, supposedly the site of secret drownings or disposal of inconvenient bodies. People claimed to hear faint cries or see shadowy figures around it, especially at dusk. Of course, palace officials denied everything, blaming imagination or superstition. But that didn't stop rumors from spreading like wildfire. Another chilling story involved the restless spirit of consort Jen. Allegedly, Jen was forced to die on orders from Empress Dowager Cixi, drowning in a palace while at just 24 years old. Ever since palace residents claimed Jen's ghost wandered through halls and gardens, weeping quietly. Even today, visitors to the Forbidden City report sudden chills or eerie sensations near the area where she died. Coincidence, maybe. Or perhaps Jen's spirit is still seeking justice from beyond the grave. The harem wasn't alone in ghostly sightings. Emperors themselves were occasionally haunted. Emperor Qianlong reportedly saw the ghostly figure of his beloved consort, Xiangfei, appearing in mirrors and windows long after her mysterious death. Whether driven by guilt or grief, Qianlong was so troubled by these visions, he ordered rituals and offerings to appease her spirit. Creepy, definitely. Sad, even more so. Interestingly, palace authorities sometimes used ghost stories strategically. Want to keep people from snooping around forbidden areas. Start a rumor about evil spirits haunting those spaces. Need to explain mysterious deaths or disappearances without revealing dangerous truths. Blame ghosts. Supernatural tales weren't just spooky. They were politically useful. But palace ghosts weren't always ominous. Sometimes these spectral visitors offered comfort. Some consorts believed spirits of loved ones appeared during times of illness or despair, providing solace when palace life became unbearable. Eunuchs, isolated and lonely, occasionally claimed ghosts, provided companionship and comfort during quiet hours, proof that even in death, humanity's desire for connection endures. Now, whether these hauntings were genuine supernatural phenomena, elaborate tricks, or just products of fear and imagination doesn't matter much. What matters is they vividly reflected palace realities. Ghost stories gave voice to suppressed fears, unspoken grief, and unresolved injustices, providing an outlet in a palace otherwise ruled by silence. Today, tourists wandering the Forbidden City still report feeling watched, hearing whispers, or sensing presences they can't quite explain. Maybe the palace remembers its history, refusing to let its darkest secrets fade away entirely. After all, some stories are simply too powerful to die. So next time you're alone in the dark, spare a thought for the harem residents who live daily with secret scandals and ghosts real or imagined. And as we prepare to close our journey, let's explore one last chapter: the quiet triumphs of those who survived it all. Ready for the final twist? Stick around. It's worth the wait. After wandering through shadows and ghost stories, let's shine a gentle spotlight on those who quietly survived it all. Because amidst the darkness, scandal, and intrigue, there were also stories of incredible resilience, small silent victories by women who refused to be erased completely. They might not have made history books, but their strength still echoes softly through time. Think about it. Surviving life in the Forbidden City harem was no small feat. Navigating jealous rivals, dangerous politics, and even supernatural scares required courage, cunning, and luck. Yet somehow, against all odds, certain women managed not just to survive, but to carve out small spaces of dignity and peace within palace walls. Take, for example, consorts who skillfully avoided the spotlight. Rather than competing fiercely for imperial favor, these women chose careful invisibility. They avoided rivalries, lived modestly, and formed quiet alliances for mutual protection. Sure, they might have never become famous, but they also avoided the dangers and betrayals that came with attention. Sometimes surviving meant intentionally blending into the background, choosing safety over glory. Then there were those who found quiet ways to resist palace restrictions. In a place where women had almost no control over their lives, small acts of rebellion became powerful. Secretly learning to read, passing forbidden messages, or maintaining hidden friendships. These tiny rebellions represented huge victories. They reminded these women they were still human beings with dignity and agency, even in a world designed to erase them. And let's not forget the palace servants and eunuchs who quietly supported and protected each other. Though they occupied the lowest ranks, they formed subtle networks of care, kindness, and mutual assistance. A shared meal, a whispered word of encouragement, a small act of protection, all became lifelines in a harsh environment. Surviving palace life wasn't just about avoiding poison or politics. It was about preserving humanity and compassion against all odds. One powerful example of quiet triumph was Empress Xiaozhuang, who skillfully navigated palace politics to protect her grandson, the Kangxi Emperor, during turbulent times. Xiaozhuang never openly defied authority. Instead, she quietly built alliances, diffused tensions, and created stability behind the scenes. Her subtle strength helped shape a generation of imperial leadership without fanfare, proof that true power doesn't always shout at whispers. Even in retirement, some palace women found ways to thrive. Older consorts or empress dowagers who had successfully navigated their dangerous youth sometimes used their later years to mentor younger women, passing on survival skills and quietly shaping the palace's future. These mentorships weren't flashy, but their impact was deep, lasting, and profound. Today, historians piece together these quiet stories from palace records, poems, diaries, and fragments of whispered legends. Though the palace's dramatic tragedies and scandalous intrigues attract attention, it's these subtle stories of resilience that remind us of human strength and quiet courage. They teach us that surviving wasn't always about defeating enemies. It was often simply about outliving them. As we close this chapter, let's take a moment to honor these silent survivors. They faced jealousy, poison, betrayal, and despair, yet somehow found ways to hold on to dignity, compassion, and hope. Their victories weren't loud or glamorous, but they mattered profoundly. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember them. Picture a quiet courtyard at twilight, filled with soft whispers, gentle laughter, and the rustle of silk. Imagine women who, despite everything, found ways to love, support, and protect each other. Let their quiet courage inspire you, reminding you that strength often hides behind silence, grace beneath resilience. Now let's softly wrap up our journey with one final gentle whisper. And now, dear listener, it's time to let go of intrigue and tension. Imagine stepping slowly away from shadowy halls and ghostly whispers, walking gently into a peaceful garden bathed in moonlight. Feel the soft breeze, breathe in the faint fragrance of night-blooming flowers, and allow the palace walls to fade slowly behind you. Tonight, history rests quietly, carrying its secrets softly into dreams. Know that these stories have settled gently in your mind, leaving lessons of strength and resilience. Good night, dear friend. May your dreams be soft and peaceful, filled with quiet courage and gentle whispers of hope.